Welcome to the Alexander Standard. Today's episode, Andriskos. Or is it Philip the Sixth? You tell us.
Welcome to the Alexander Standard, where we rank all the successors of Alexander the Great, from Perdiccas to
Cleopatra the Seventh.
My name is Dustin.
And I'm Meredith.
And how you doing, Meredith?
I'm doing great. We are in the midst of Snowmageddon, but right now we still have power, so it's just fun.
So take that, wood-burning stoves, and I'm just kidding. We do hope everyone is safe during snowpocalypse. Well, here we are. The final episode of Season 2. We are at the end of the Antigonid dynasty. And Macedon. Meredith, we've had some bumps on the road, but is it bumps in the road or bumps on the road?
Whatever you want it to be.
Bumps on top of beside the road. But I don't know about you, Meredith, but I think Season 2 went a bit smoother than number 1. We've had some good stories, good times, and good memories. Even during the dark days of Ptolemy Krounos, Meleager, and Antipater II, where we had very little information to build off. And then we, mainly you, managed to survive the gargantuan multi-part episodes of Pyrrhus of Epirus and Antigonus II Gonatus. We had a wealth of information here, arguably too much for someone like me that can't seem to crack the code of concision. Then, when it seemed like the dust had settled and Macedon was on the road to recovery, then came the reigns of Demetrius II and Antigonus III, where both the Kingdom of Macedon and our humble podcast seemingly faced uphill battles. The Macedonians against resurgent resistance in Greece, while you and I stared down a dearth of source material. And yet, by the time of Philip V, Macedon had finally managed to regain its hegemony over Greece, while we, mainly I, tested everyone's patience with an in-depth, nobody asked for so many details, 4.5-part episode coverage of Philip's reign. Finally, much like the indemnity that the Romans forced on Philip V, I too did my own penance by condensing the subject of Philip's son, Perseus, into a single, massive episode. After Perseus, it seemed like we were done with Macedon and ready to shuffle down the space-time continuum to cover the Seleucid dynasty. Perseus was defeated and taken to Rome. The Romans had pillaged Macedon, and Epirus for good measure, and even dismantled the kingdom of Macedon itself, replacing it with 4 small, powerless republics. But then, like that thorn in your sock that you thought you had gotten rid of until you relaxed and stabbed yourself in the middle of the foot, I came out of nowhere, or at the end of Perseus's episode, to announce that we weren't done just yet. Nope, there was one more king to cover, Meredith. A goober named Andriskos, who claimed to be the long-lost son of Perseus, and who briefly reunited Macedon for one last dance with the Romans. And while most of that is true, even then I was holding out on you, Meredith, because I have a surprise for you. We're actually covering 2 kings today, and even that is a lie. You see, although Andriskos, it was just 2 kings when I wrote it, but then when I got to the end of this, I found some more stuff. So I didn't know it was a lie until I found the lie. You see, although Andriskos doesn't have a long reign, I quickly discovered that shortly after he fell off the radar, yet another pretender to the Macedonian throne appeared, named Alexander VI. And he, ever so ephemerally, rose to challenge Rome in an embarrassing blink and you miss it revolt, and after writing that, I then found more. So, we're gonna go over Andriskos and Alexander VI today, and the other ones I found. Think of it as a gift or punishment, as we do, in fact, close out Season 2 today. So kick back, pop a beverage, turn off the lights, and then turn them back on because your house is clearly haunted, and enjoy the final days of the Kingdom of Macedon. And as for the sequence of events, for us, we're obviously going to start out talking about Andriskos, with Alexander VI being an embarrassing little coda to the end. Here we go! Sources. Though understandably not a plethora of coverage on Andriskos, there's a bit more than you'd think. This is due to a number of reasons. For one thing, the reign of Andriskos doesn't last very long, spanning only a year or so. And yet, there's more information on Andriskos than those with similarly short reigns like Philip IV, Meleager, or Antipater II. Second, this period of Mediterranean history is highly fragmentary and not nearly as well documented as previous periods, like those during the lives of Philip V or Perseus. Thus, we should see the fact that we have as much as we do on Andriskos as a blessing. In a period of scarce documentation, we have a good bit to chew on for Andy. Our ancient sources then will be some of the usual suspects from our last few episodes, such as Livy, Polybius, Cassius Dio, our old friend Diodorus Siculus, as well as some lesser-known buddies, Florus, Valerius Paterculus, and even Ampelius. Now, as far as modern sources, we'll be relying on overall coverages of ancient Macedon and the Hellenistic period, but especially the final chapters from Ian Worthington's 2023 book, The Last Kings of Macedonia and the Triumph of Rome. Etymology. The origin of the name Andriskos was kind of tricky at first, but ended up being relatively straightforward. In the end, Andriskos primarily comes from the word aner, meaning man, and the suffix iskos, meaning like or ish, right? So with Andriskos, we essentially just get the meaning of man-like or man-ish. Like, damn, the guy couldn't even get the name to mean manly. He's just kind of manly. But that's not all. Mostly it is. While history recognizes his true name as Andriskos, or whatever, the man himself tried to adopt the royal name, Philip VI. I say tried because, despite his own efforts, many ancient writers derisively called him Pseudo-Philip. That is, the false Philip.
Fake Philip.
Fake Philip. Let's go to the background. There's no pedigree today.
Oh, yeah, I imagine. He comes from the wrong side of the sheets.
Yeah, I mean, even if we were to accept that he was... No, I'm not even going to accept anything. All the sources overall reject any claim that he was legitimately Perseus' son. So we know nothing about his background, his lineage, or whatever. That being said, I'm going to proceed to the section that I have called background, because we have no background. Meredith, if it please the court, I would request that we go back just a bit to the defeat of Perseus at the end of the Third Macedonian War in 168, and I see how you're squinting at me already. The reasons for this are both pragmatic and selfish, and you can decide which is which. On the one hand, I had to rush through the settlement of Macedon after 168 because we were trying to keep Perseus' episode from getting too big. We had varying success at that. On the other hand, even though Andriskos doesn't take the throne of Macedon until 149, like 20 years later, the events that transpired during this time set the stage for Andriskos' reign. That is, like most people in history, Andriskos was a product of his time and the events happening in the world around him. So, whatever was going on in Macedon, that's what allowed Andriskos to pop up. Okay, well, the year 168 was surely a dark one for the Macedonians. Perseus, as we remember, was in dire straits, even worse than was typical for a defeated king. After losing the Battle of Pydna, Perseus undertook a seemingly never-ending retreat to the east, stopping briefly at each city he passed, where he unsuccessfully attempted to salvage the war effort against Rome, before retreating again ahead of the pursuing Romans. In the end, Perseus' flight ended at Samothrace, a small island off the northeast coast of Greece. While there, Perseus hit rock bottom, or so he thought at the time, losing all of his remaining money, abandoned by most of his attendants, and surrounded by the Roman navy. Nevertheless, he tried to negotiate a settlement that left him with some vestige of royalty, perhaps as little as the title of king alone. The Roman commander, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, was sympathetic to Perseus' plight, but nevertheless demanded that the king surrender both himself and the kingdom of Macedon itself unconditionally to the Roman people. It was at this moment that the Roman historian Livy bemoaned the fate of the kingdom of Macedon, which had once spanned from Macedon to the outskirts of India, but was now confined to a small, poor island. As we also know, whereas Philip V retained his kingdom and his position after Rome's victory in the Second Macedonian War in 197, the Romans had lost their patience at the end of the Third Macedonian War in 168. Paulus's troops had already pillaged the Macedonian countryside, and even cities like Pydna, as well as the Macedonian capital, Pella. Now, with Perseus' surrender, the Senate decided to extend Paulus's command in Macedon by a year, and dispatched a 10-man commission to oversee the settlement not only of Macedon, but the entire Greek world. Indeed, it looked like the Romans were out for blood. Many of those who had allied with Rome, perhaps in hopes of profiting from the outcome, weren't rewarded, but instead ignored. Any cities or states that skirted with neutrality, however, quote, scrambled to avoid any punitive measures at the hands of Rome, according to Worthington. The Rhodians, for instance, tried to placate the Romans by executing any of Perseus' supporters in the city. Nevertheless, the Romans saw fit to take away the important island of Delos from Rhodes and transfer its ownership to Athens, which basically crippled the Rhodian economy. More cities in Greece followed Rhodes' example and exiled or executed Macedonian sympathizers or any that had called for neutrality. In the Achaean League, for instance, 1,000 members were deported to Rome, where they spent the next 17 years as political prisoners. Now, this detail hits home for us, Meredith, as one of these political prisoners in Rome was none other than Polybius himself, whose histories are one of the most important sources for the history of the Roman Republic and the Hellenistic world. Does that sink into you? When I keep talking about Polybius?
Yes, I know him.
Okay, he's one of those guys.
So he was Greek?
Yeah, he's from the Achaea. He was from he lived in Achaea. The kingdom of Illyria, which had been a Macedonian ally, was dismantled and divided into 3 separate states, which were forbidden from interacting with each other, whether through trade, property, ownership, or marriage. The districts had to be completely separated, while half of any taxes that had been formerly paid to their king Gynthius were now sent to Rome. About a year after the Battle of Pydna, in the fall of 167, Pallas announced the Roman Senate's settlement of Macedon. Under the guise of freedom and autonomy, the Macedonian kingdom was dismantled and divided into 4 independent republics called Merides, which, after several takes, Meredith reminded me, basically sounds like I'm just trying to say her name. Each with its own capital and functioning government, and each forbidden to interact with the other. The purpose here was expressly to weaken Macedon and keep it divided, so as to prevent any ability to resist Rome ever again. Kind of ironic. Thus, as with the example of the Illyrians, the new Macedonian Merides were forbidden to have any political, economic, or military interaction or contact. Furthermore, the silver and gold mines throughout Macedon were closed. Cutting timber for ships was forbidden, and the ability to raise an army was limited to defense against barbarian attacks from the north, and it wasn't even successful at that. Pallas then read out a new law code for the Macedonian Merides, a code written by the Roman Senate itself, which included a provision to ensure that Macedonian tribute would reliably be sent to Rome annually. Finally, an untold number of leading citizens in Macedon, including former friends and advisors to the king, were deported to Italy, under threat of execution if they refused. The consequence here was that the new Macedonian states were, quote, bereft of capable citizens, according to Worthington. And just as with their new economic and political limitations, it seems that the Romans were trying to denude Macedon of any statesman who potentially could rally the inhabitants of the former kingdom or stir Macedon to a revolt. And despite their efforts, that's exactly what happened. But for now, the question of Rome's enemies, Illyria and Macedon, had been settled, while the Greeks, especially those who had flirted with neutrality, were reminded of their place in the hierarchy of things. Abject humility in the face of Roman hegemony. But when you think about it, Rome's terms weren't excessively harsh. Measures were taken to defang Macedon and Greece and Illyria, but there wasn't rampant bloodshed. Having said that, I'm clearly setting you up for actual bloodshed. You see, there was one more group that needed to be dealt with. Traitors. Although the Epirots, and the people of Epirus, that is, had officially joined the war on the side of Rome, a number of cities in central Epirus, specifically the Molossian tribe, rebelled and joined the Macedonian cause. Thus, on his way home through Epirus, sometime between April to July of 167, Pallas decided to make a pit stop, as it were, and gently chastise these Molossians for their treachery. Along the way, Pallas sent messages to the Molossian cities with orders to place the entire contents of their treasuries at a designated spot and to await detachment of Roman troops who would be sent to collect the tribute. But Pallas had a surprise, a dark surprise, up his sleeve. He made arrangements so that the timing of each body of troops he sent to the Molossians would arrive on the same day, at the same time. Does that make sense?
They're coming every Tuesday at noon.
Yeah,
to pick
basically.
up stuff.
He made arrangements so that each body of troops that he sent to the Molossian cities would arrive on the same day and at the same time, early in the morning. But the commanders of these detachments were given special instructions. At around 10 a.m., the signal was given, and the Roman troops were given permission to plunder their assigned cities. As many as 70 Epirot cities were viciously looted in one day, with their walls being torn down for good measure. The amount of loot was so much that each Roman cavalry soldier received 400 denarii, or around $29,000, while each infantryman took home about 200 denarii, about $14,400. What's worse is that 150,000 Epirots were enslaved in the process and sent to Rome. You have a look on your face.
So was the surprise that they just thought they were going to have to pay tribute, but the surprise is that their country was annihilated?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just making sure I understood.
Yeah, so he's like sending hey guys, you need to they knew they were in trouble, right? But they were trying to do what like Rhodes and everybody else did. They were trying to make nice. I think they actually had sent some people, some like, hey, here are the bad guys. Just kill them, not us, that kind of thing. And Paulus is like, hey man, do me a favor. Put all your money in the center of the city. We're going to send some troops to come pick it up. They're like, yeah. And I think what I was reading was this was done under the guise of removing garrisons. It's kind of, I don't know why you'd pay the garrison that had forcibly occupied your city, but it was just kind of like, put the money in the city, we're taking out the garrisons, Roman troops are going to come pick it up, and we'll be on our way. And as soon as they got in there, and Paulus made sure that they all got there at the same time so they could all give the order at the same time to systematically, without any chance for reaction, to plunder the cities.
Gotcha.
Yeah. This was seen as devastating. I mean, it is devastating.
Terrible surprise.
Yeah. No, but even in the context of Roman savagery in the past, this was extra. The sources are all like, this was unheard of.
Until next time.
And as for Perseus, well, we learned last episode what happened with him. The deposed Macedonian king was sent to Rome, where he featured in Paulus's magnificent 3-day triumph, thereafter living the rest of his life in Roman captivity.
Or schmexecuted.
Now, in the last episode, I had scant details for you on Perseus's fate, because, I was in a hurry. But I got something now. According to Worthington, Perseus was at first locked up in a small dungeon in Alba Fucens, a small town about 60 miles from Rome. He was supposedly starved to death, to such a degree that other prisoners pitied him and snuck him food. And then for some reason, or perhaps as an alternate story, the Romans moved him to his own house and put him under house arrest. From here, we have two apparent options for Perseus. One story says that he simply starved himself to death. Oh, yeah, then I have a note to myself that says, LOL, quote, simply, semicolon, I couldn't do it. I guess that was in my fat phase.
Which was one day ago.
Yeah, basically. Another story says that the guards watching Perseus, who were forbidden to physically assault the king, instead kept him awake all through the night, without end, until Perseus eventually died from sleep deprivation.
So either way, I don't need to go back and give him a catastrophe point.
Oh, no, he did.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, Perseus's kids had a different fate, and indeed a debated fate, which brings us to today's episode. His eldest son, Philip, remember that name?
He became a notary, didn't he?
No.
Oh.
The other one. His eldest son, Philip, died 2 years later in a Roman prison, but his younger son, Alexander, lived on and ironically became a notary public in Rome. And I don't know what happened to his daughter. Apparently he had a daughter. Now, what's that you say? Austin, you said the fate of this children is debated. What's that mean? My name is Meredith. Yes. Well, as is often the case, there were rumors out there that Perseus had more children. Though we'd have to wait over 10 years for this possibility to manifest. Now, going over the fate of the Macedonian and Greek world is important, because it sets the stage upon which Andriskos will appear. So I will put it to you, Meredith. Do you think the Romans were harsh or lenient in the terms they imposed upon the Macedonians, Illyrians, Epirots, and the Greeks?
I mean, any loss of human life is awful. Relying on what you're saying, the contemporary sources were saying at the time, perhaps they were too harsh on Epirus. Greece, the Greek states, not Macedon, have been a source of annoyance for me for the past couple years, so I'm always happy to see them get smacked about a bit.
That tells me I've done my job well.
Mm-hmm. Macedon, I get it. you could say arguably they made out better than Epirus. I mean, I know their economy's been crippled and we're suffering from like a brain drain here of kind of their best and brightest being taken away, but it sounds like large. Like I feel like for the everyday citizen, everything's probably like fine. If you were a farmer before, you're a farmer now. You just can't go visit your pesky cousins over in District 2 anymore.
Well, you hate those cousins anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For you, you're like, oh, this makes the holidays so much easier.
Yes. I don't have to go anywhere. I can't go anywhere. Sending messages, I'm like, I'd love to come see you, but I'm in a different Meridace.
I'm a little concerned for the restrictions on marriages. I'm like, we're going to get inbred really fast if we can't cross Meridace's size.
Oh, I can't even think about that. Or I hadn't even thought about that. Because I know that the ban on marriage is to prevent alliances.
Also, this was the Third Macedonian War. So, in theory, like, fool me once, shame on me.
Yeah.
Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me a third time. So, I mean, it does sound like this is the time to bring down the hammer.
Jinx, buy me a Coke. That's a very good answer because it's a very complex situation. And it's got a lot of sides to it. For one thing, anyone who wants to say Rome is a bully or that they're bloodthirsty needs to remember what you just said. This was the third war. And only in the third war does Rome actually bring the hammer down. And when they do, it's pretty light. And the Roman sources themselves, and hell, even Polybius, says that when you think about it, the Macedonians got off really well because a lot of the lower classes were freed from the oppression of the monarchy. They weren't working for a king anymore. They were arguably working for themselves. On the other hand, some people say they didn't like it at all. And that's what we're going to get into. As I mentioned, Rome's policies in dismantling the Illyrian and Macedonian kingdoms was to hamstring the regions from any further attempts at resistance or rebellion. But it's important to note that no troops were stationed, no governor assigned. While undeniably under Roman influence, Illyria, Macedon, as well as Greece, and even Epirus were all technically and essentially free and independent. To that end, some historians argue that Rome didn't really care about Illyria and Macedon, and were content with pacifying the region with an attempted reorientation of the socio-political status quo. That is, temporarily closing the silver and gold mines, instituting republican governments, and forbidding diplomatic contact would create a, quote, new political class that would be amenable to Rome, but self-governing. Now, in many ways, we can see a parallel to Rome's settlement of Illyria and Macedon in some of America's own escapades in the last century, namely the U.S. invasions and occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. Stay with me here. Unfortunately, as America itself experienced, you can't march into a kingdom, topple the existing government, then institute a new government and expect there to be no problems. Undoing the way things have been done for decades, or even centuries for our purposes, is a massive upheaval of the status quo, and the imposition of a new political system has the potential to aggravate existing instability, to the point that it threatens to tear this new system down entirely. Polybius then states that Rome faced a similar situation in Macedon over the course of the 160s and 150s, where the arrangement they had set up there began to experience strain under the weight of increasing instability, threatening to fall apart entirely. In 162, for instance, we hear of political violence near the old Macedonian capital of Pella. Some guy slaughtered the city council in his town. Furthermore, in a turn of events that should be of no surprise to anyone, the closure of the gold and silver mines resulted in an economic downturn, which made the annual tribute sent to Rome all the more burdensome.
That was one thing I thought was odd, because my first thought was, does Rome not want them churning out more tribute?
I think the calculations were done where the Romans, Paulus read out the new law code that was written by the Senate. I tried to word it in a way that hinted at the irony, but they had done all this stuff. They had hamstrung the governments. They had shut down the silver mines. But in all the provisions, the Romans made sure that there was enough to make sure they got their money, right? So they were getting their money, but that's precisely the problem here. It cost, more, it had what's the word?
Finite resources.
No, you drop a pebble into the water.
Ripples.
It had ripples that formed. Closing them down like, okay, we've done the numbers, we can still get the tribute, but that's going to cause economic problems that increase down the road. And that threatened the Macedonian tribute to Rome. Lastly, the limited defense forces allotted to each of the 4 Macedonian republics was unable to secure the northern borders from barbarian attacks. So in short, Macedon was in chaos.
Who's still up there?
Oh, everyone, it's not who's still up there, like they've never gone away. It's the Dardanians in the north, the Thracians are in the east, you have the Illyrians in the west, and just little semi-barbaric, semi-Macedonian groups that are just surrounding Macedon. And this really underscores Macedon's geopolitical role. They were that bulwark, that shield that prevented, I hate using the word barbarian because it's flawed, but it's just the convention that's used in the texts. It prevented barbarian incursions into Greece. They were the wall in the north. But now that that's been crippled, they can't hold the line anymore. Now we're transitioning to early life. I don't know if we want to put that in there, but now I'm transitioning to Andriskos. And it is amidst the background of this maelstrom in Macedon that a young man named Andriskos appeared somewhere around 152, claiming to be Philip, a long-lost son of Perseus. And as for his early life, Meredith, regardless of the story,
not much is known.
That's right. In fact, we know almost nothing, not even when he was born. But since it does seem that he reached his age of majority, which is like 18, 20 years old, around 152, I suppose we can estimate that he might have been born around 172 or 170, which would have meant that he was born during the Third Macedonian War. Now, although we've got very few references on his life in our sources, what we do have is not very flattering of Andriskos. Indeed, they portray Andy as a charlatan of the highest order, and none of them seem to believe that he was actually Perseus' son. But they do confirm he could spin quite the tale. The Greek historians, Polybius and Diodorus Siculus, for instance, both call Andriskos a pseudo-Philip, and in what seems to be a comment on the absurdity of his claims. Polybius also called Andriskos a Aeropetes Philippos, a Philip fallen from the sky. Because he's just like, all of a sudden there's a Philip. Where did he come from? I guess he fell from the sky. Yeah. Our Roman sources, Livy, Velleius Paterculus, and Florus, assert that Andriskos was the lowest kind of man. Finally, a lesser-known Roman historian from the 200 CE, Lucius Ampelius, says that Andriskos was a vir plebeios et deneger, a common man and a degenerate. So if Andriskos is commonly held by our sources to have been a grade A dingus, then how could he manage to first unite and then take the throne of Macedon? And where the hell did he come from? The question is important since, as Worthington points out, it's clear that Andriskos basically came out of nowhere, since our sources don't mention him until he starts trying to claim the throne. Florus speculates a bit further on Andriskos' background, for instance, saying that he may have been a freedman or a slave, but definitely was working as a mild-mannered laborer before his rise to fame. The timeline after that is a bit murky. So how did he do it? Well, according to Diodorus Siculus, Andriskos looked a lot like Perseus' actual eldest son, Philip. At first, this all started as a joke among Andriskos and his friends, sometimes an innocent jest, and sometimes apparently even as a tease or an insult. Like, ha, you look like a dead king's son. Take that. Ha. Over time, however, word got out, and more people started to hear about Andriskos' resemblance to Perseus' son. Then, gradually, people stopped regarding it as a joke and began to think of it as truth. Eventually, Andriskos decided that far be it from him to correct the rampant dumbassery of the masses, so he decided to run with the delusion and then just openly declared himself as Philip, a long-lost son of Perseus. You want it? You got it.
I'm also picturing him tossing a couple coins at his coworkers, being like, don't you dare say,
swear to God.
My name used to be Andriskos.
Swear to God. At this point, I think it's worthwhile for us to question Andriskos' reason for selecting his chosen identity as Philip VI, the son of Perseus. On the surface, it's obvious, since this was the basis for his claim to the Macedonian throne. The problem, however, as Polybius states, was that it was common knowledge that Perseus' son, actual son, Philip, had died in Italy in 163. If the real Philip's fate was commonly known then, it would be pretty dumb for Andriskos to pop up in 152 and take up the identity of a man who had died a decade earlier. It's for this reason, then, according to Worthington, that Andriscus likely did not claim to be Perseus's actual eldest son, Philip, but instead a lost, illegitimate son of Perseus. That does make sense to me, and as we'll soon see, Andriscus did in fact say that his mom was a concubine. Furthermore, taking the name Philip wouldn't necessarily imply that Andriscus was claiming to be the eldest son. There are other examples of kings having multiple sons with the same name. For instance, on the Seleucid side of things, 2 of Antiochus III's sons were eventually named Antiochus, while much later Antiochus VIII had 6 children, of whom 2 were named Antiochus. So Andriscus could claim to be a Philip without anyone accusing him of masquerading as a dead guy. And yet, interestingly, Worthington then says that because Andriscus claimed to be the son of a prostitute, he would therefore not be considered a true Antigonid. And I'm not sure if I agree with that. Perseus himself had been rumored to be the son of a concubine, and that does not appear to have hindered his legitimacy as the true heir and son of Philip V. And indeed, as Worthington himself states, there are multiple examples from the Hellenistic period and beyond where claimants use their illegitimate bastardy as the principal argument for their legitimacy. In other words, Andriscus wouldn't have claimed to be an illegitimate son of Perseus if he thought for a second that it would hinder his claim to the throne of Macedon. And since it didn't hinder his claim, I think we can assume that, at least in the perspective of the wider Hellenistic world, he very likely would have been perceived as an authentic Antigonid by anyone who believed his story. And as for next steps, we're not really sure, but it does appear that Andriscus might have made an immediate play for the throne of Macedon. According to Ampelius, writing in the 200 CE, as well as the Byzantine historian John Zonaras, who was writing around the 1100s, but based his work on another Roman historian, Cassius Dio, who did write in the 200s, Andriscus went straight to Macedon and stirred up a revolt there, claiming to be Philip, but who we would call Philip VI. Unfortunately, Zonaras says that Andriscus was unsuccessful at this point, stating that no one would swear allegiance to him. And so, Andriscus was unsuccessful in his initial claim to the Macedonian throne. To be clear, although unsuccessful, Andriscus did have a loyal base. First of all, we have to remember that Ampelius and Zonaras both say that Andriscus stirred up a revolt. That's not something you do alone. Nevertheless, maybe Andriscus needed some more support. And so, around 152, Diodorus says that Andriscus, likely accompanied by his followers, went to Syria, where they entered the employment as mercenaries at the court of the Seleucid king Demetrius I Soter. Pretty soon, Andriscus approached Demetrius with a group of followers and formally requested aid from the Seleucid king to restore Philip VI to the throne of Macedon. Now, at first, Demetrius didn't take Andriscus seriously, and, well, he thought he was a moros, or a stupid, dull man. Basically a kook. But, unfortunately, a crowd soon started to gather, while more and more people spoke in favor of Andriscus, ultimately demanding that Demetrius either give him the aid requested to retake Macedon or instead abdicate the Seleucid throne. Yeah.
Just love your little head tilt.
I mean, it's just like the gall. It's just like, hey, help this guy take a throne. Well, I don't know. Fine, give him your job. Asshole. You know? It's like, who are you?
I'm Farmer Bob.
Shut up, Bob. Okay, smartly smelling danger in the wind, Demetrius arranged for Andriscus to be arrested in the middle of the night and promptly shipped the pretender off to Rome, with a letter to the Senate explaining the insanity.
Merry Christmas.
Take
I
that.
got you this gift.
Can you imagine what those people thought the next day? It's like, you need to make him a king in Macedon or a king in Seleucia. You need to choose. Demetrius is like, all right, just take care of it tomorrow. I promise, we're good. The next day, Farmer Bob comes out, where's he at? Who? Andriscus. He's gone. I sent him.
I Uno reverse that, boy.
No, just like it's amazing. They don't even talk about what the crowd thought after that.
Well, what are they going to do?
Demand Andriscus. You've got to have a cover story.
You just say he left. I
mean, I hope that he lied to them and said, I sent him to Macedon, like you said. That's what I'm hoping happened.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not going to be able to check.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like thinking of the reality, like humans are really bad at keeping secrets, and it must have gotten out what he did.
I don't think they care.
Yeah, that's what I was
Once
the
he's
other
gone.
the other thing I was going to say is it's like most things is like once a crowd reaches its first discomfort or impediment, it's like, meh, I'm hungry anyway. Now, when Andriskos arrived in Rome, he got lucky. Apparently, the Romans saw him as no threat. So instead of putting him to death or keeping him in prison, they gave him a house. Put him under house arrest in some random Italian town. And so while there, Andriskos took the time to refine his story, which shook out as follows. According to Livy, Andriskos claimed that he had lived his life ignorant of his royal origin and lived with adoptive parents, an unnamed Macedonian woman, and a man from Crete, in the city of Adramyttion on the north-central coast of Asia Minor. As reference, the site of Adramyttion is in the modern town of Burhania in Turkey, which I'm sure gives everyone a perfect idea of where I'm talking about.
Totally.
Whatever. The pictures look online look really pretty.
There you go.
There you go. At some point when he was a teenager, Andriskos' dad got real sick and decided that this was the perfect time, while on his deathbed, mind you, to spring some news on Andriskos. Sorry, bud, you're adopted. But apparently not giving him any details of his parentage. That bit of news Daddy Dearest entrusted to Andriskos' mom, who may or may not have been Andy's actual mother, we just don't know. A sealed written tablet was given to her, written by the late King Perseus. In any case, Daddy Dearest made Mommy Fakest swear not to reveal the contents of the tablet until Andy reached his age of maturity, which would have put him around 18, 20 years old. Well, when that special birthday arrived, Mom sprung the news, telling young Andy that he was the son of King Perseus and a concubine, and that he had been handed over to the Cretan tutor in anticipation or during the war against Rome as a contingency, so that in the event of a wipeout, some member of the royal family would survive. But anyway, beyond this, Andy's supposed birthday card from Perseus had a more important surprise. Not a $5 bill, but better. A treasure map.
Whoa.
Yes, according to Diodorus Siculus, Andy's letter from Perseus also revealed the location of two massive treasures, one 60 feet, approximately 18.2 meters under a road near Amphipolis, and another just randomly sitting in a random-ass room in Thessalonica. Seriously, just said, like, in this room. That's it. No one would think to look there. Both of these supposed treasures combined amounted to 220 talents of silver, the equivalent of almost $100 million by today's standards. Now, if you're asking me, because I'm cool, I think this story stinks of a hot, steaming poo-poo. Just like my opinions of that band that played the song in Heated Rivalry. But apparently, a lot of people believe this. Hollander. And when you think about it, I should have been sprinkling more of those around there. Meredith and I just finished, I finished my first watch of Heated Rivalry. Meredith's on watch 3.
I've watched it 2.5 times.
Yeah, and I've been doing that constantly. Testing our marriage. Okay, so, Hollander. When you think about it, it's not unreasonable to imagine a buried treasure because archaeologists quite often do find coin hoards buried underground, all the time. Well, again, the Romans seem not to have cared much about Andriskos. And as further evidence of this, around 150 or early 159, Andriskos escaped Rome to the city of Miletus near the southwestern corner of Anatolia. Hey, Meredith, where's Anatolia?
Modern-day Turkey.
That's right. Yeah, anyway, now to be fair, the Romans had bigger fish to fry in 149, namely the Third Punic War, where they would eventually destroy the city of Carthage itself. Nevertheless, the fact that Andriskos was able to just nope out so easily still shows that the Romans didn't see him as a threat. In any case, arriving in Miletus, Andriskos immediately went to work, spreading the good news that he was Perseus' long-lost boy. Once more, the forces of logic attempted to prevail, and the magistrates of Miletus threw Andriskos into prison. Eventually, certain unnamed envoys, presbeon, who I think could have even been Roman envoys, otherwise why even mention them, came through the city. And when the magistrates of Miletus requested that these envoys give their advice on what to do, They took one look at Andriskos and just said, he's crazy, let him out of prison. Just let him do his thing. And they sent him on his way. Yet again, plot armor had saved Andriskos' life. Next, Andriskos continued spreading that good old gospel news that he was Perseus' boy, attracting more and more followers. Eventually, he heard about a woman named Calliope, who had formerly been one of Perseus' concubines and was now the wife of Athenias, whose brother was the current king of Pergamon, Attalus II. So, this is an important lady. Sensing a likely sympathetic ear, Andriskos made his way to Calliope and effused his elaborate romantic story. As it turned out, Andriskos was right. Calliope bought the story hook, line, and sinker. She gave him money, royal clothes, a crown, and assigned 2 slaves to attend to his needs. But perhaps the most valuable gift that she gave him was information on his next potential mark. King Teres, the current king of Thrace, modern-day Bulgaria, who had supposedly married a daughter, either a daughter of Philip V or the granddaughter of Perseus. I have a parenthesis that says explain in detail if necessary, and the look on your face tells me it might be necessary. Here's what I dug up. I don't know what they're talking about, okay? Because in the source it says Teres had married a daughter of the late King Philip. We know Philip V had one daughter, I think, Apama III or Apama IV. Regardless, we know who she married, and she didn't marry a Thracian king. I'm pretty sure also we know that Perseus' daughter, whoever she was, didn't marry a Thracian king. But also, that source doesn't say a daughter of Perseus. This is a daughter of Philip. The only other option, according to the footnote in the source I read, said that it was referring to the dead Philip, Perseus' son, who was never a king. So I don't know who they're talking about. And I don't think they do either.
Sounds like this woman's made up her own story as well.
Yeah, a match for Andriskos. She made up a whole new king. So from here, Andriskos headed north and crossed over into Europe, where he was welcomed with honor at the city of Byzantium. Next, now with even more followers, Andriskos continued north and soon arrived at the court of King Teres in Thrace. Here, Teres showered Andriskos with more honors, placing a crown on his head, either the same crown from before or a new crown, and gave him a guard of 100 soldiers. Furthermore, Teres acted as a liaison of sorts for Andriskos, introducing him to more Thracian kings and chieftains, who also gave Andriskos more troops. Finally, Andriskos sold his story to another Thracian chief, Barsabas, who now agreed to a full-blown alliance alongside Andriskos, with the design to invade the Macedonian republics, unite them, and allow Andriskos to sit on the throne of Macedon. And take the throne he did! Over the course of a few months, according to Polybius, probably in the spring of 149, Andriskos overcame the meager resistance offered by the Macedonian republics and conquered the entirety of Macedon. I suppose that it's important to note the disagreement of the sources over how welcome Andriskos' reuniting of Macedon was. Polybius, for instance, was utterly confused, not only as to how Andriskos managed to conquer Macedon, but also how he managed to get as much popular support as he did. Polybius says that Macedon had gotten a great deal from Rome after the Third Macedonian War, claiming that, quote, the country as a whole had been delivered from the arbitrary rule and taxation of autocrats, and, as all confessed, now enjoyed freedom in place of servitude, and several cities had, owing to the beneficent action of Rome, been freed from serious civil discord and internecine massacres. To the contrary, as soon as he reestablished and reclaimed the throne of Macedon, Polybius then says that Andriskos immediately enacted a purge of all political opponents and Roman sympathizers, which included exile, torture, and executions. And yet, despite this turn of events, not only were the Macedonians going to show that they were willing to support such a hateful man, Andriskos, but they would also display a great valor in defense of his throne. How could anyone fail to be confused, asked Polybius. In the end, the best answer Polybius could muster is that maybe the gods were just toying with Macedon. Additionally, we should remember that Andriskos was in fact unable to conquer Macedon without foreign support at first. But it is also notable, as Florus points out, that Andriskos carried with him not only a royal name, but a royal presence and a royal spirit. It's very charismatic. So what next? Well, despite this surprising turn of events, the Romans didn't do much. Yeah, they're fighting Carthage at the moment, but still, you'd expect them at least to do something about all this. And as for Andriskos, he definitely kept busy, because after taking Macedon, he immediately set his sights on expanding his new domain down into the northern Greek region of Thessaly. And according to Zonaras, he successfully occupied a big chunk of the country. We will recall, Meredith, that Thessaly had been essentially Macedon's backyard for the last 100 or so years. So, this felt natural to him. The Thessalians, for their part, duly appealed for aid. But not to Rome, as you might expect, but instead to the Achaean League.
Wasn't Perseus making his way down into Thessaly?
Yep. The Macedonians lost it after the Second Macedonian War under the reign of Philip V, but it was always that first target, get Thessaly back. So he's just doing what any good Macedonian king would do. So yeah, the Achaean League, that's weird for the Thessalians to request aid from them. Why not Rome, right? Now, personally, I'm confused by this. Even if Rome was busy with Carthage at the time, they were still considered the head honcho in the Mediterranean, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe this is us making assumptions. Worthington reminds us that affairs in Greece had been rather turbulent since the defeat of Perseus. Competition and conflict between big cities like Thebes and Athens continued unabated, while the Senate was continuously bombarded by envoys asking for Roman arbitration. Meanwhile, the Achaean League, in defiance of Roman directive 50 years ago, had actually started to expand in southern Greece, reasserting their dominance in the Peloponnese, and in particular, Sparta. And on their own part, we can detect a great deal of disinterest on the part of the Romans in their lackluster investigations in the East. As only one hilarious example, though not related to Andriskos, in 149 the Romans sent another three-man commission to investigate unrest in the Anatolian kingdom of Bithynia. Of the three ambassadors, Marcus Licinius suffered from severe gout in his legs that hindered his mobility. Aulus Mancinus had suffered from so many head injuries that people were amazed he was alive. While Lucius Malleolus was considered to be, quote, the most stupid man in Rome. Supposedly, Cato famously remarked that this commission had neither feet, nor head, nor a brain. Cue laughter.
We're sending our best and brightest, and that's the commission that shows up at your town to help.
You know how I know that we're meant for each other? My very next line. Clearly the Romans weren't sending their best and brightest to the east. Yeah, we think the same. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying the Romans did nothing in response to Andriskos. Instead, I'm saying that they did very little because they didn't take it seriously. Thus, the response we do see from the Romans wasn't enough. To that end, here's their first response. Still in 149, the Romans sent a single envoy, Publius Cornelius Scipio Nasica Corculum, but whom we can simply call Scipio Nasica. Now, on the one hand, at the time, Scipio Nasica was among the most influential statesmen in Rome. That alone would seem to be a pretty significant response from Rome, sending one of their best politicians to the front. But on the other hand, Scipio wasn't sent with any real means to deal with Andriskos. And in fact, it looks like he may have been sent for political reasons. Apparently, on the lead-up to Rome's war with Carthage, Scipio Nasica was leading the anti-war party.
So it's more about getting him out of town.
Yes. Thus, the famous Roman historian Friedrich Münzer suggested that Scipio was shipped off to Greece not out of any desire to have him solve the problem with Andriskos, but rather by the pro-war party in Rome simply to get him out of the way. To that end, Nasica wasn't given the resources to stop Andriskos by force, and therefore he initially tried to find a peaceful solution. But again, let's pause and look at the implications there. I know it's all going to be edited out, listener, but there are so many second, third, and 5,000th takes here. It's hilarious. And we're at the point in the script, everything's typed right. This is just me.
Well, you haven't talked all day.
I know, that's what it is. I'm not warmed up. Okay, here we go. But again, let's pause and look at the political implications here. Aside from Nasica's assignment being merely a case of political maneuvering, the fact that he wasn't given any troops even further shows how little the Romans regarded Andriskos. Nevertheless, Nasica was going to do the best job that he could. And so, according to Zonaras, Scipio Nasica did try to negotiate with Andriskos, but he quickly ascertained that peace wasn't an option. Thus, after sending a letter to Rome apprising the Senate of the situation, Nasica went south and gathered a force of Greek allies, mostly from the Achaean League, and went back north into Thessaly to try and check the advances of Andriskos and the resurgent kingdom of Macedon. Our sources aren't clear on the result of Nasica's makeshift counterattack. Our fragments from Livy give us various suggestions. One fragment from Livy's Periokai, the epitomes or the summaries, says that Thessalia cum et illam invadere armis atque occupare pseudo Philopus velit per legatos Romanorum auxiliis Achaiorum defensa est. Which means Thessaly, which the false Philip had wanted to occupy and invade with his armies, was defended by the Roman envoys and Achaean allies. In contrast, Zonaras says that Nasica and the Achaeans managed to push Andriskos back to Macedon. And yet, another fragment of Livy, the Oxyrhynchus excerpt found in Egypt, says, Per socios populi Romani, Andriskos ex Thessalia, pulsus in ultimam Thraciam, which I translate to mean, through the allies of the Roman people, Andriskos was pushed out of Thessaly and into the farthest part of Thrace, which might imply that Nasica's counterattack even kicked Andriskos out of Macedon entirely. Given that we've gotten the full spectrum of possibilities, just engaging Andy in Thessaly, pushing him into Macedon, or pushing him out of Macedon into Thrace, the middle path seems likely. Nasica succeeded in defending Thessaly from Andriskos, but he couldn't dislodge the false Philip from Macedon entirely. Moving on to 148. That's fine, because the fact that Nasica actually had a military engagement with Andriskos, well, that finally got Rome's attention. Kind of. The Romans were still unwilling to dedicate serious manpower to Macedon, but decided at least to send one legion under the command of the praetor, Publius Juventius Thalna. Therefore, finally 13 pages into this script, the dispatch of Thalna in 148 marked the beginning of the Fourth Macedonian War. Thalna wasn't necessarily a super important person in Roman politics, which again shows Rome's disinterest. Only one legion was dispatched, not even under the command of a consul, just a praetor. But the Romans thought that this was enough. At some time in the summer of 148, Thalna was making his way to the borders of Macedon when he was suddenly attacked by Andriskos. It's notable that the historian Florus states that Andriskos' army consisted not only of Thracian auxiliaries, but also Macedonians. Worthington suggests that the mention of the Macedonians in Andy's command likely referred to former soldiers from Perseus' armies 20 years earlier. This would imply, according to Worthington, that Andriskos' army was, quote, hardly a rabble, but a professionally trained army. In any case, Andriskos not only defeated Thalna's army, but killed Thalna himself.
Oh, wow.
In fact, Zonaras says that Andriskos could have massacred the entire Roman army had he not decided to withdraw his forces at night. He was just playing it safe, but if he hadn't, he could have killed them all. Now, up to this point, I've emphasized just a little bit that Rome wasn't interested in Macedon, which is my ironic way of saying I've said it a bunch, but the defeat of Thalna reverberated throughout the Mediterranean. For one thing, according to Morstein Marx, famous Roman historian that I actually emailed one time.
Did he email you back?
He did. He said, I sound like a hard worker. Thanks, Morstein Marx. Now, you sound like a really nice guy. Quote, the Romans had never suffered such a heavy defeat in all their campaigns against the great powers of the Hellenistic East. Indeed, this also seems to have lifted Andriskos' spirits. According to Zonaras, Andy decided to invade Thessaly again, now that he had cleared the board of any resistance. And in Macedon itself, Diodorus says that the false Philip amped up his policy of cruelty and tyrannical disregard for law back in Macedon. Using false accusations, Andriskos put to death several wealthy individuals, many of whom were his friends. It's possible that he was trying to raise some cash, because alongside the reference to the wealthy people, Diodorus comments that Andriskos, who was by nature brutal, bloodthirsty, and arrogant, was also shot through with greed and every base quality. He just needed some money. But as for the Romans, well, Thalna's defeat did seem to wake them up. Sort of. On one hand, they didn't send a consular army, but instead another praetor, Quintus Caecilius Metellus. But on the other hand, they did give Metellus 2 legions to command instead of just 1, like Thalna, while also likely granting him proconsular imperium, probably due to the increase in his troops. Furthermore, the Romans didn't drag their heels this time, but promptly dispatched Metellus over to Greece without delay. And when Metellus arrived, probably in the summer of 148, he immediately got to work. It looks like he tried to rally the Achaeans to join him, but they were busy dealing with Sparta. But he did manage to get naval support from Attalus II, the king of Pergamon. Thus augmented at sea, Metellus marched north to Macedon to engage Andriskos. And as for the campaign against Metellus, depending on how you look at it, Andriskos was either playing it safe or too fast and loose. For one thing, he pulled his troops back and concentrated around Pydna. He avoided the coastline because he was afraid that the Pergamene troops would land behind him. Then, in an unnamed battle, he succeeded in defeating Metellus' cavalry, but wisely pulled back out of fear of engaging the Roman infantry, which is something that got Perseus in trouble once. So, good move. But then, strangely, he decided to divide his forces, using one half to attack Thessaly, while holding the other one back to defend his position at Pydna. But then it looks like Andriskos had to deal with some treachery in his camp, because we hear of a Macedonian general named Telestes betraying Andriskos and going over to the Romans under Metellus. In response, Andriskos arrested Telestes' wife and children and punished them for their husband and father's betrayal. This could be those arrests we hear about happening in Macedon at this time. Maybe there was something going on in his court. Metellus then advanced against Andriskos directly. It's not clear which specific forces he engaged, since Andriskos had split his army, you recall. Worthington states that Metellus bypassed the force in Thessaly and attacked Andriskos directly at Pydna. We have no details for what followed, but we do know that Metellus crushed the Macedonians in his first engagement, after which the rest surrendered. Andriskos retreated and successfully raised another army to face Metellus in Thrace, but this force was defeated before it could even assemble onto the battlefield. Damn. Yep. Now, although this seems like Andriskos had his ass handed to him, and he very well may have, it's worth pointing out that the Oxyrhynchus fragment of Livy suggests that Metellus achieved these victories with difficulty, or aigre. In any case, this was it for Andriskos. He ran deeper into Thrace, this time seeking refuge at the court of a Thracian king named Byzes. But Byzes was smart, and seeing writing on the wall, decided to hand Andriskos over to the Romans. After this, we don't know much about the fate of Andriskos. We do know that Metellus, who took the honorific Macedonicus, had a triumph when he returned to Rome, and Lucius Impellius says that Andriskos was part of that triumph. As far as after the triumph, all we can possibly extrapolate is from the late Roman chronicler Eusebius, who says that Andriskos was sent as prisoner to Rome. Thus, it's equally possible that Andriskos lived on as a prisoner, like Perseus, or he was killed after the triumph. In any case, the Fourth Macedonian War was over. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that was it. Fourth Macedonian War over. Andriskos captured. Let's go home. But not yet. Almost immediately after Andriskos was put down, another long-lost son of Perseus appeared on the scene. Wow. This time taking the name Alexander VI. We know almost nothing about this guy, but he apparently raised a sizable army around the Nestus River in eastern Macedon near Thrace.
What's sizable?
Sizable.
Okay.
It is a able size.
No, that's fine. I was curious if they gave a specific number.
Well, that's coming up, actually, just not for him, because there's another guy. He must not have been too big of a threat, though, since by late 147, Metellus, still there, had succeeded in running the pseudo-Alexander out of Macedon entirely, chasing him north and west into the region of Dardania. And that's the last we hear of him. And that's it. No more kings in Macedon. Oh, wait. Nope. In 142, another long-lost son of Perseus pops up in Macedon.
Man, this guy's getting busy.
Yeah. Like 20 years later. No, 30 now. They keep popping up. 20, 30, I can't count. Our sources disagree on his identity. Some people called him Pseudo-Philip, and therefore Philip VII. Others remembered him as Pseudo-Perseus, and therefore Perseus II. Whoever he was, he managed to raise an army of around 16,000 troops. Not too shabby. He too was defeated and killed by a quaestor now, named Lucius Tremelius. And that detail is important to me because of the subject matter of my dissertation, talking about Roman commanders in the field. A quaestor is a treasurer, Meredith. Quaestor does not have imperium. So if you're beat by a quaestor, you suck. Not really, but it just shows how low in the totem pole
Did the Quaestor have a legion?
He's not supposed to. There's no in the normal constitution. There's no provision that allows for a quaestor to get imperium, and yet we hear of quaestores pro praetore or something like that. And I'm trying to say, Meredith, is this might have been an extraordinary command,
or just he and his household guard were riding by and were like, ah.
Okay, now that's it. No more kings. No more. You know what? There actually was one more guy. I'm not even joking. I think his name was Euphenius. He pops up like 50 years later or so. Yeah, 50 years later. Also claiming Antigonid heritage, but he never got his revolt off the ground, so I skipped him. Or did I?
I hope so.
But seriously, no more kings, no more Antigonids. So what's next? As for the fate of Macedon itself, it too is somewhat of a mystery. It's still there, by the way. Macedon is still there.
I know, I've been in their embassy.
Meredith, it's funny. It's a good joke. It's long been assumed, even by me, that the Romans put the boot on Macedon after this rebellion and decided instead to place the entire region under direct Roman administration as the Provincia Macedonia. But historians in recent years have pushed back on this, noting that references to the Macedonian Merides continue well into Rome's imperial period. Nevertheless, what did change was that from this point forward, a Roman praetor was permanently stationed with a legion in Macedonia. And while this was originally for the purpose of protecting Greece and the northern frontiers of Macedonia from external threats, the praetors assigned here pretty soon took on administrative duties. After all, it had been customary for almost 100 years now for the Greek states to send envoys to Rome in order to seek arbitration from the Senate. After 147, however, this was made easier. Why go to Rome when a representative from Rome itself was sitting in Macedonia and willing to dispense Rome's judgment?
Judgment.
And that's it. Now I've got
Okay.
some closing words. And so, one of the big three had fallen to Rome. The great kingdom of Macedon was founded, according to tradition, by the Argead dynasty in the mid-600s BCE and rose to prominence in the reigns of Philip II and Alexander III the Great in the mid-300s. Thereafter, following Alexander's death in 323, which I just heard about, Macedon bore much of the brunt of the subsequent 50 years of civil war. Finally, Macedon received a new king under the Antipatrid dynasty, led by Cassander and his three sons, Philip IV, Antipater I, Alexander V. But unfortunately, the bad times weren't over. The remains of Alexander's empire was still a hotbed of instability, and the Antipatrids were only able to hold the throne for a decade. In 294, the Macedonians briefly fell under the control of the Antigonid dynasty during the tumultuous reign of Demetrius I, Poliorcetes, the besieger of cities. But, dingus that he was, Demetrius was not the solution to Macedon's problems, but instead, the harbinger of even more chaos. After Demetrius was deposed in 287, another decade and a half of deleterious squabbling brought Macedon to the brink of collapse. In relatively quick succession, Macedon fell under the control of Lysimachus, the king of Thrace, Meredith's favorite successor, a cadet Ptolemaic line under Ptolemy Karaunos, and his brother Meleager, followed by an ephemeral Antipatrid resurgence under Antipater II Etesios, Cassander's nephew, and a possible interregnum under the leadership of the general Sosthenes. Thankfully, a vestige of stability was finally around the corner, though. In 272, the Antigonid dynasty retook control of Macedon under the rule of Demetrius I's son, Antigonus II Gonatas. Despite some early stumbles, wherein the kingdom was briefly retaken by Pyrrhus, Antigonus regained the reins of Macedon and ruled for nearly 40 years. From this point forward and until the very end, Macedon remained under the rule of the Antigonids, arguably showing itself as the most stable of the successor kingdoms after Alexander. After Antigonus II's death in 239, the control of Macedon stayed under Antigonid rule and passed in smooth succession to Gonatas' son, Demetrius II Autolycus, who in turn passed the throne in 229 to his cousin, Antigonus III Docen, who was acting as regent for Demetrius' son, Philip V. Following Docen's death in 221, the throne dutifully passed to Philip V, who ruled Macedon for 42 years, possibly the longest of any Macedonian king. Philip V brought Macedon to the final zenith of its power, and though he was finally defeated by the Romans in 197, he successfully guided Macedon into a world of Roman hegemony. Then, after uncharacteristic dynastic feuding, Philip V was succeeded in 179 by his eldest son, Perseus, Under Perseus, Macedon made its last stand as an independent power in the Greek world and the Mediterranean at large, with Perseus fighting his own unsuccessful and destructive war against Rome. Lastly, as we have seen today, the memory of the Antigonids was very much alive 20 years later, when Andriskos, claiming to be Perseus' son and taking the name Philip VI, briefly reunited the kingdom of Macedon. And even after his defeat, 2 more claimants to Antigonid descent appeared in the form of Alexander VI in 146, and a mysterious pretender, alternatively known as Philip VII or Perseus II in 143. But with the defeat of these pretenders, the Antigonid line was extinguished, the Macedonian kingdom was dissolved, and the second season of our award-winning podcast has come to an end. But Meredith, not the other ones, but just Andriskos. Let's give him a rating.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Aristea.
Battle prowess. As is tradition, you go first.
He doesn't deserve nothing. He did successfully retake Macedon.
Yeah.
Even if it was with outside help, that doesn't matter.
Nah.
No. Additionally, too, he defeated a legion.
Not only defeated, he massacred a legion and killed the commander.
Mm-hmm.
Something that had never happened in like Roman escapades in the East. So that's a first.
I mean, that's pretty spectacular. I mean, for some past context, Antipater Etesius, we gave him a 2 because he did mount that comeback tour.
Yeah. So by that default, you get a 2 because
he's at least a 2.
he did that.
Yeah, but I feel like he should be higher. Kraunos, for example, got a 4. I'd be happy with the idea of like, I give him 2, you give him 2, he gets 4. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Oh, they got that total.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm going to give him a 4. He defeated the Romans in at least 2 engagements, possibly another one depending on how he handled Nasica and everything like that. Multiple invasions of Thessaly, able to raise another army. I mean, he made one big blunder, and that was it. When he split his forces.
I will also give him 4.
Okay.
Which gives him an 8.
Come at us if you disagree.
Like his fake dad.
Ooh. We gave Perseus an 8?
Yep.
No way.
Yep.
Asteroid, who cares? 1, 2, 3.
Eutychia.
Success.
Eh?
Meh.
Eh.
Mer.
Well, you know,
Hmm.
if you're just looking at Macedon not kingdom, but then make Macedon kingdom again, quite successful. But once again, though, Eutychia does also kind of more so lend itself to success as a ruler. So how was he? Not
On 2 occasions, at least, and it seems chronologically divided into those 2 occasions. All we hear in his 1 year of rule is him just being heavy-handed and just tyrannical. The sources are probably remembering him unfavorably, but still, we don't hear of him doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And we constantly hear of him in the company of his Thracian mercenaries, which tells me, now he only had a year, but still it's just like he couldn't hold it without his Thracian mercenaries or Thracian auxiliaries. I don't hear of him reopening the mines. I don't hear of him, well, because Perseus, when he came to the throne, he welcomed people back. He made a PR tour. We don't even hear of Andriskos doing that. Perseus went into Thessaly too. Perseus was doing it as part of his PR tour. Andriskos just said, this is mine. I don't think he did a good job. I think I can give him a 2 because he retook the throne, and he held it longer than Antipater and Meleager and those guys did. But that's it.
Well, Kraunos got a 4, and Meleager got a 0, and Antipater 2 Etesios got 0s.
I'll give him 1.5.
I will also give him a 1, so he gets a 2.5.
2.5.
Be a little annoyance.
1, 2, 3.
Acon.
Image. Meredith.
Mm-hmm.
You got me some images.
I do, actually.
Let's
I
see
have
This
I
boy
have
look like.
2 images.
Uh-oh.
So, he apparently had time to have a coin minted.
Well, the coin does say Basileus Philippou. So, I mean, they're just calling himself Philip. Got the diadem. He's skinny. He's a skinny guy.
Yeah, he is skinny, so I'm not seeing the family resemblance
I'm-
here.
I know,
like we
I'm-
did from Philip to Perseus.
I see it because I don't know how to say it. Maybe it's in the nose or the chin, just like with the beard and everything. But what in God's name is that coming down his neck? Is that
I
like
think that's just more of his beard.
That's a long neck beard, dude.
Mhm. More beard. But yeah, very prominent nose.
Big old nose.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this coin does not look as elaborate as his predecessors,
True.
which would make sense. He didn't have a lot of time. Against this, I would only say, because it's, remarkable, he didn't have a lot of time, but he had enough time to make coins. Philip IV only lasted for 4 months, but he had coins. So he had less time.
But the coin wasn't this detailed or this good.
It wasn't?
Mm-mm.
Oh, cool. All right, what else we got?
Well, so that's it for contemporary
Mm-hmm.
images, but I do enjoy where I can
Oh, I know what you're going to show me.
giving you some other stuff. So this is a miniature from the 15th century
Brad's going to like that.
labeled as Death of the, quotes, False Philip.
What amazes me is that for such a minor king, some guy in the medieval period put that much detail into being wrong. Because that's not how he was killed, that we know of.
Stabbed from the front and the back going, oh no.
Oh, no.
Now, further detail says this comes from between circa 1413 and 1415, but that's what I've got for you, unless you would enjoy this image here of it in its wider page.
Oh, that looks cool,
In
actually.
its folio.
That actually looks cool.
Mhm.
That actually does change my mind a little bit. Because knowing that it's part of a larger text, which was likely a historical text,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that that would probably be the preserve of, the wealthy or aristocratic, tells me that he was perceived as being important enough to get that treatment then. Yeah, 1,500 years after he died. Makes me want to give him a point. But just one.
One contemporary image, one miniature, the 15th century, at least showing that, that was an interesting story.
He was remembered, yeah.
Mm-hmm. See, maybe a 3, just because it is a good coin, and there's something to the lasting legacy,
Yep.
even if it's bad. So, for example, you minis with no contemporary images did get an 8 based off later century depictions of scenes from his life.
We did? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think we had some physical descriptions
Well, that's true.
of him too.
And the whole point of Andriskos' rise to power was his appearance.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Oh, yeah. People saying, oh, he looks
Forgot
like
all about that.
Perseus.
And I forgot that that's what we considered for Acon in the beginning. Depictions of his appearance.
We weren't spoiled yet.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I'm boosting him big time. I was going to give him a 1 or a 2.
Mhm.
But since everything he had was based on his image, and it was big enough, and we have that quote from Florus that was he didn't just have a royal appearance, he had a royal spirit and a royal stature or whatever like that. I'm going to be wild. You ready for it?
Mhm.
5.
8 it is.
8 it is. Take that, you minis. No, don't take that. We love you, you
I
minis.
love you so much.
Best boy. 1, 2, 3. Mania. Craziness. Did Andriskos ever do anything that made you go, dude, what the hell are you thinking? Now, just by default, the gall to embark upon this adventure, that gets you some points.
Oh, definitely. I was going to say his whole origin story, because it's one thing to be oh, yeah, I look like him, don't I? I look like him, don't I? I could take the throne.
Yeah, you can see him with his friends check this out. No. He's going to do it.
It would have maybe even made a little more sense if it was something he had been brought up as a noble or someone in the upper class, and it was always said you kind of look like him, and so he had been raised with military training and all this stuff. This is essentially just a very low class citizen, doesn't even have a farm.
No.
And he's I think I could do this.
Yeah. And as we heard, no brother, where art thou? You ain't no kind of man if you ain't got land.
No.
And he ain't got no land, but he still made himself that kind of man. No, I agree with you. And also to that, I would add that he got stymied 3 or 4 times and just kept trying. At any point, he could have just been killed. Because clearly people were seeing him as a possible threat or a problem. Demetrius said, oh, God, get out of my kingdom. You're going to cause a revolt. The Romans were like, go to prison. And then in Miletus, again, they're like, no, you're not causing trouble for us. Get in prison. So 3 times at least, he got out of it. He was off the hook. I got to tell you, me, first of all, I never would have tried this. But the first time I would have got caught, I'd been like, that's it. It was a good try. I'm done. And he just kept saying, nah, let's do it one more time. No F's given. I'm going to give him 6.
Yep, I'll go 6 as well. So that's 12 for Mania.
Kronos. Time.
1 year. Times 1.54. That's 1.54.
Wow.
And then,
Catastrophe.
did he die in battle? Did his ass get assassinated in his sleep or whatever? I can't think we can give him the point. No point. Which brings us to beep, bop, boop, bop, bop, beep, beep. What's the total?
32.04.
That's a respectable number, most of which is attributed to the fact that he had the cojones to try this.
Yeah, it puts him not quite a full point ahead of Ptolemy Craunos.
That tracks.
Mm-hmm. But then, I'd say appropriately lower than Pyrrhus through Perseus. All of them were in the low 40s and up. So he's a good solid,
It still amazes me.
kind
Though.
of 10, 12 points below that pack.
I think we were definitely in bad moods when we rated Perseus and Pyrrhus.
Well, they both got 47.
I know. I don't want to change them. I'm just like, when you think about it, you'd think they would have gotten higher.
Well, that's why it's important to remember it's not all about the points.
It's about the friends we made along the way. It's about, well, Meredith, would you find yourself telling someone on the street about Andriskos? Would you say he rises up to the
Alexander standard?
I think so. Hear me out.
Okay.
This guy from nowhere takes just a common occurrence throughout his life that he looks like the deposed king of Macedon, says, well, maybe we could make something out of that, survives 3 imprisonments, gets outside foreign help to retake a country that had been disbanded for 18, 20 years, destroys a legion and everything. I think that's a pretty cool story. Now, maybe I temper myself with, it was over as soon as it started.
Well, I gotta tell you, I agree with you, Hollander. Yeah, I think we should give him the standard. You made a good point. I was on the edge because I was just like, 1 year, doesn't do anything. But when you said it like that, I'm like, he came from literally nothing and then managed to retake the freaking king. Yeah, I everything you said, I agree with it. Give him the standard, Meredith.
I did. So it is written.
In the annals forever.
So it shall be done. All right. Well,
Season 2.
Yes, that's season 2. We will probably have a little debrief about that like we did season 1. But thank you, everybody. I feel like we started strong on season 2, got tripped up in the middle there hard, and have limped our way over the finish line, but we did it.
I think it was a pretty good limp, though. Given that we had some pretty big boulders thrown at us, I think we did pretty good. But I think Meredith would agree with me. I think the idea here is that we're going to take a bit of a break. Because with me teaching and with everything just, settling in, make sure I've got time to write up enough episodes so we can have a steady release when we return, maybe in a few months. So we're not going anywhere.
Oh, certainly, yes. So while we take a few months to make sure we do the Seleucids justice, I just want to remind everybody that you can also join us over on Patreon, where we release episodes twice monthly at our Hitairoi level. So join us over there. It's a lot of fun. And then, as always, if you enjoy the show, please leave us a rating or a review. Tell a friend, tell a family member. You can find all our social media in our show notes.
I think the emphasis there is, even though we're going away from the main feed for a few months, we're taking a break. We're not taking a break from the Patreon.
No.
Right. But we're going to be back.
And a quick reminder and plug, we are now both going to be presenting at Intelligent Speech on February 28th. Dustin will be doing a presentation on a still yet to be determined topic under the broad category of companions and rivalries.
Determined to work a reference to heated rivalry in there.
I'm sure you can now. And now I We'll also be speaking on a round table panel about siblings alongside Roberto from Czar Power and Rob from Totalis Francium. And if you are interested in buying tickets, we also have a discount code ALEX, so please join us.
But until that time, this has been, and ever shall be,
The Alexander Standard.
Go play in the snow.